Picture this. It's February 1221. You're standing on the walls of Urgench, the wealthiest city in Central Asia, capital of an empire that controlled the Silk Road, home to 100,000 people. Below you, the Amudarya River flows peacefully, the same river that's made your city rich for centuries. Except, the river isn't flowing anymore. You're watching 100,000 Mongol soldiers digging, not building siege towers, not constructing battering rams, digging massive trenches, channels, redirecting the entire river. They're going to drown your city, not metaphorically, literally flood it, turn streets into canals, collapse buildings, drown everyone who doesn't die fighting. And here's the thing that keeps you awake at night. This is personal. Your Shah, Muhammad II of Khwarazm, ordered the execution of 450 Mongol merchants 3 years ago. Genghis Khan sent ambassadors to negotiate compensation. Your Shah executed them too, shaved their beards, the ultimate insult in Mongol culture, then sent their heads back to Genghis Khan in a box. Genghis responded by abandoning his war in China, turning his entire army west and spending 3 years systematically destroying every city in your empire. Bukhara burned, Samarkand fell. Balkh was erased so thoroughly that it's still called the City of the Dead. Millions dead. An empire that took centuries to build, shattered in months. Now, it's your turn. Urgench is the last major city standing, and Genghis Khan doesn't just want to conquer it, he wants it to stop existing. The siege will last 13 days. When it's over, Urgench will be gone. Not captured, not subjugated, erased. The Mongols will kill every living thing, demolish every building, then flood the ruins so thoroughly that future archaeologists won't even be sure where the city was. This isn't a siege, it's an execution. If you want to see how one insult led to the destruction of an empire and the deaths of millions, hit that subscribe button. Because the siege of Urgench is the most brutal consequence of underestimating Genghis Khan. This is the story of 13 days that erased a city from history, and it started because someone thought the Mongols were barbarians who could be ignored. To understand why Urgench got butchered, you need to understand what the Khwarazmian Empire was in 1218. This wasn't some backwater kingdom. This was one of the richest, most powerful states in the Islamic world. The empire stretched from the Caspian Sea to Afghanistan, controlling virtually all of the Silk Road trade routes through Central Asia. Every merchant caravan travelling between China and Europe paid taxes to the Khwarazmian Shah. Every city along the route, Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, Urgench, was swimming in wealth. Urgench itself was the jewel. Built on the Amudarya River in modern-day Uzbekistan, it had irrigation systems that made the surrounding desert bloom. Markets sold silk from China, spices from India, furs from Russia. The craftsmen of Urgench were famous for textiles, metalwork and glasswork. The city had libraries, madrasas, astronomical observatories. This was high Islamic civilization at its peak. The population was around 100,000, massive for the medieval period. Triple-layered walls protected it. The outer wall was earthwork and timber, designed to absorb siege engine impacts. The middle wall was brick and stone, 40 feet tall. The inner wall protected the citadel. Engineers had designed the defences over centuries. Urgench was considered virtually impregnable. The Shah was Muhammad II, technically Ala ad-Din Muhammad. He'd inherited a strong empire from his father and made it stronger. Conquered new territories, built new fortifications, assembled an army of 400,000 soldiers, one of the largest in the world. He was also catastrophically arrogant. In 1218, Genghis Khan was in the middle of conquering northern China. The Jin dynasty was collapsing. Mongol armies were taking city after city. But Genghis had a problem. He needed trade. The Mongol economy ran on conquest and commerce. They needed silk, grain, manufactured goods, and the fastest route to Chinese goods went through Khwarazmian territory. So Genghis did something unusual for him. He tried diplomacy. He sent a trade caravan, 450 merchants, with a letter proposing a commercial treaty. The letter addressed Shah Muhammad as an equal, proposed mutual trade benefits, and included expensive gifts. It was respectful, professional, the kind of diplomatic opening that usually led to profitable relationships. The caravan reached Otrar, a border city governed by Inalchuk, a relative of the Shah. Inalchuk looked at these Mongol merchants with their foreign goods and strange clothes and made a decision that would do millions. He accused them of being spies, arrested all 450, seized their goods, worth a fortune, then executed them, all of them, buried the bodies and kept the money. When word reached Genghis Khan, he didn't immediately declare war. He sent 3 ambassadors, a Muslim and 2 Mongols, with a message. Hand over Inalchuk for punishment, compensate for the stolen goods, and we'll forget this happened. Shah Muhammad made his second fatal mistake. He could have arrested Inalchuk, paid compensation, and avoided war with the most dangerous military force in Asia. Instead, he executed the Muslim ambassador, shaved the beards of the 2 Mongol ambassadors, a deliberate insult that marked them as criminals, and sent them back to Genghis Khan. It was a statement. I'm not afraid of you. You're barbarians. I rule a civilized empire with 400,000 soldiers. What are you going to do about it? Genghis Khan reportedly climbed a mountain, prayed for 3 days, and then returned to his army with a simple message. We're going west. He left 20,000 troops to continue the China campaign, turned the rest of his army, about 100,000 men, toward Khwarazm, and began one of the most destructive military campaigns in human history. The Mongol army that invaded Khwarazm in 1219 wasn't a barbarian horde. It was the most sophisticated military machine in the world. Every soldier was cavalry. Every man had 3 or 4 horses, rotating mounts to maintain speed over long distances. They could cover 60 to 80 miles per day, triple the speed of European armies. They lived in the saddle, eating dried meat and fermented mare's milk, sleeping on their horses during long marches. Their weapons were composite bows, laminated wood, horn, and sinew that could punch through armour at 300 yards. Mongol warriors trained from childhood, shooting from horseback at full gallop. They didn't form battle lines and trade volleys. They swarmed, encircled, feinted, and destroyed enemies through mobility and coordination. Their tactics were brutal and effective. They'd approach a city, offer surrender terms. If accepted, the city would be spared and incorporated into the Mongol system. Pay taxes, provide troops, keep your local government. If refused, the city would be destroyed. The population massacred as an example to others. They also used psychological warfare. Refugees fleeing destroyed cities, spread terror. Stories of Mongol brutality grew with each telling. By the time the army reached the next city, the defenders were already demoralized, and they had siege engineers. The Mongols learned siege warfare from the Chinese, the most advanced in the world. They had catapults, siege towers, mining equipment. They could take fortified cities that had withstood sieges for years. Shah Muhammad's 400,000-man army should have crushed them. The numbers were in his favour. His troops were well equipped, experienced, defending their homeland. But Muhammad made a catastrophic strategic error. He divided his army. Instead of concentrating his forces and fighting the Mongols in a decisive battle, he garrisoned his troops throughout his empire. 10,000 here, 20,000 there, spreading them across dozens of cities. He thought the fortifications would hold while he raised more troops. It was the opposite of what he should have done. The Mongols operated in multiple columns, each 20,000 to 30,000 strong. They'd surround a city with 30,000 troops, overwhelm the 10,000-man garrison, then move to the next target. Muhammad's divided army was defeated in detail, picked apart piece by piece. Bukhara fell in 1220. The Mongols breached the walls in days, killed the garrison, then assembled the population in the main square. Genghis Khan reportedly stood before them and said, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Then they systematically looted the city, raped the women, enslaved survivors, and burned it. The smoke was visible for days. Samarkand was next, one of the greatest cities in Asia. Muhammad garrisoned it with 100,000 troops, his best forces. The Mongols surrounded it with 50,000 and began the siege. After 5 days, the Turkish garrison troops betrayed the Persian leadership and opened the gates. The Mongols offered them surrender terms, then massacred them anyway once the city fell. The craftsmen were enslaved and sent east. Everyone else was driven into the desert and slaughtered. 30,000 women were raped and killed. The great mosque was demolished. Libraries that held centuries of knowledge were burned. Balkh resisted. The Mongols killed everyone: men, women, children, dogs, cats. Then they demolished every building, burned the wreckage, and ploughed the ground with salt. Medieval sources claim not even birds would fly over the ruins. Modern archaeology confirms the city was completely abandoned for 40 years. Shah Muhammad fled. He ran from city to city, watching his empire collapse, unable to stop it. The Mongols sent a pursuit force, 20,000 cavalry under Jebeh and Subutai, two of history's greatest generals. They chased Muhammad across Persia, destroying cities that sheltered him. Muhammad eventually died on an island in the Caspian Sea, broken and insane. His empire destroyed, his family scattered. His son Jalal ad-Din tried to organize resistance. He was brave, capable, and fought several successful battles against Mongol detachments. But he couldn't stop the main army. Eventually he fled to India, pursued by Genghis Khan himself. By early 1221, the Khwarazmian Empire was effectively destroyed. Every major city except one had fallen: Urgench, the city that produced the empire's wealth, the administrative capital, home to the Khwarazmian royal family's ancestral lands, and the place where the survivors of the empire's military had retreated. It was defended by 50,000 troops, garrison soldiers, remnants of defeated armies, civilian volunteers. The city's governor was Turkan Khatun, Shah Muhammad's mother. She was in her 70s, a legendary figure who'd been involved in politics for decades. She refused to surrender. Genghis Khan gave the siege to his sons, Yoki, Chagatai, and Ögedei. This was partly practical. He wanted them to gain experience, and partly political. Yoki was his eldest, but his legitimacy was questioned. Chagatai and Ögedei were ambitious. Giving them a joint command was supposed to force cooperation. It didn't work. February 1221. The Mongol army surrounds Urgench. 100,000 soldiers form a complete encirclement. No one gets in. No one gets out. Yoki, commanding the northern forces, proposes negotiation. Urgench is wealthy. Why destroy it when it could be captured intact and provide tax revenue? He suggests offering generous surrender terms. Chagatai calls him a coward. The city insulted the Khan. It needs to be destroyed as an example. Every resident needs to die. No mercy. They start arguing, openly, in front of their armies. The siege can't even begin properly because the commanders are fighting each other. Genghis Khan, camped with the main army nearby, hears about the dispute and makes a decision. Ögedei, the youngest, is now in overall command. He'll coordinate the siege. His older brothers will follow his orders. This is brilliant political maneuvering. Ögedei is more diplomatic, less likely to make enemies. But it's also a delay. The siege should have started immediately with overwhelming force. Instead, weeks pass while command structure is sorted out. The defenders use the time to prepare. They strengthen walls, stockpile food, organize militia units from the civilian population. They know they can't win, but they can make victory cost the Mongols dearly. When the siege finally begins, it's systematic and brutal. The Mongols don't assault the walls immediately. They start with engineering. Catapults are assembled, bombarding the city with stones, flaming projectiles, and disease-ridden corpses. They're not trying to breach the walls yet, just demoralizing the defenders, destroying buildings, creating chaos. Then they start on the river. The Amu Darya flows past Urgench, providing water, transportation, and irrigation. It's the city's lifeline. Mongol engineers, many of them captured Chinese specialists, begin digging massive diversion channels. It takes thousands of workers several days. They're building a new course for the river, redirecting it to flow directly into the city. The defenders watch in growing horror as the channels take shape. On the 5th day of the siege, the Mongols break through the final barrier. The Amu Darya begins flowing into Urgench. Not a flood, not yet. A steady flow that starts filling the lower city. Streets become streams. Basements fill with water. Buildings built on poor foundations start to collapse. The defenders retreat to higher ground, abandoning the outer districts. The psychological impact is devastating. This isn't just a siege. It's nature itself being turned against them. How do you fight a river? As the water rises, the Mongols assault the walls. They're not trying to take them yet, just keeping pressure on the defenders. preventing them from organising countermeasures against the flooding. The defenders fight back desperately. They have the advantage of walls and high ground. Mongol troops trying to scale walls in waist-deep water are easy targets. Arrows, stones, boiling oil rain down. The Mongols take heavy casualties. This is unusual. Most Mongol sieges are methodical and relatively low casualty for the attackers. But Urgench is defended by people who know they're doomed. They're fighting for every foot of ground, making the Mongols pay in blood. Contemporary sources, mostly written decades later, claim the Mongols suffered 50,000 casualties at Urgench. That's probably exaggerated, but the losses were significant enough that they're mentioned in multiple accounts. This wasn't an easy victory. By day 8, the lower city is underwater. Buildings are collapsing, bodies float in the streets, soldiers and civilians who drowned or were killed in the fighting. The smell is overwhelming. Disease starts spreading among defenders and attackers alike. The defenders have retreated to the middle wall. They're still fighting, but they're exhausted, low on supplies, and watching their city slowly sink. Ögedei orders the final assault. The Mongols attack from all sides simultaneously. Siege towers that have been constructed over days are pushed forward. Ladders are thrown up against walls. Troops wade through chest-deep water, climbing walls while being shot at from above. The defenders hold for 2 days. They're fighting in shifts, rotating exhausted men off the walls, bringing up women and elderly to carry supplies. Everyone who can hold a weapon is fighting. Then the middle wall is breached. Mongol troops pour through the gap. Fighting moves into the streets, now canals, of the middle city. It's house to house, room to room. The defenders are giving ground slowly, making the Mongols fight for every building. The Mongols start burning everything. Even with water in the streets, they're using incendiaries to set buildings ablaze. Smoke and steam mix into a toxic fog. People are dying from smoke inhalation as much as from combat. On day 11, the inner citadel is all that's left. Maybe 10,000 defenders and twice that many civilians are crammed into the final defensive ring. There's no food left. Water, ironically, is everywhere but contaminated with bodies and sewage. People are dying from disease as fast as from fighting. Ögedei offers one final surrender. Lay down weapons, open the gates, and I'll spare the craftsmen and women. Everyone else will die, but at least some will survive. Turkan Khatun, the elderly governor, refuses. They'll fight to the last. Day 12. The Mongols breach the inner wall. The final battle is slaughter. Defenders without the strength to lift weapons are cut down where they stand. The Mongols work systematically, clearing building by building, killing everyone they find. Turkan Khatun is captured alive. The Mongols bring her before Ögedei. She's in her 70s, covered in soot and blood, defiant to the end. He asks if she has any final words. She spits at him. They execute her on the spot. Then they hunt down every member of the royal family they can find in the city. The Khwarazmian dynasty is erased. Day 13. The city is taken. Now comes the worst part. The Mongols assemble the surviving population, maybe 50,000 people, mostly civilians who hid in cellars and attics. They're driven into the main square, surrounded by soldiers. Then the killing begins, not quickly, not mercifully, methodically. The Mongols divide the population into groups. Craftsmen, women of childbearing age, everyone else. The craftsmen are marched away in chains. They'll be enslaved and sent east. The women are raped, then distributed among the troops as concubines or slaves. Everyone else is killed, all of them, the elderly, children, men who surrendered, wounded defenders, tens of thousands of people, executed over several days. The killing method varies. Some are beheaded, others have their throats cut, some are simply herded into buildings that are then set ablaze. The Mongols are efficient. They've done this before. Contemporary Islamic chroniclers, writing years later, claim 1.2 million people died at Urgench. That's impossible. The city didn't have 1.2 million people, but the number reflects the psychological impact. To the Islamic world, Urgench's destruction was apocalyptic. Modern historians estimate maybe 50,000 to 100,000 died, the garrison plus a large civilian population. Still, one of the worst massacres of the medieval period. After the killing, the destruction, every building is demolished, not just abandoned, actively torn down. Walls are pulled apart stone by stone. Palaces are burned, markets are smashed, anything valuable is looted and sent east in caravans. Then the Mongols finish flooding the city. They break more dams, redirect more water. The ruins of Urgench become a swamp. The site is abandoned, unusable. Future travellers passing through the area report a marshy wasteland with broken stones poking through mud. Some don't even realise a major city once stood there. Urgench is gone, not just defeated, erased. The destruction of Urgench wasn't the end of the Mongol campaign, but it was the symbolic conclusion. With the last major city fallen, the Khwarazmian Empire ceased to exist. Genghis Khan's revenge was complete. He'd destroyed an empire that insulted him, killed millions and erased cities that had stood for centuries, all because Shah Muhammad executed some merchants. But here's the thing, this wasn't just revenge, it was messaging. Genghis Khan was building an empire that stretched from Korea to Eastern Europe. He couldn't garrison every city, he couldn't occupy every territory with troops. His empire only worked if people were too terrified to rebel. Urgench was an example, a demonstration of what happened when you defied the Mongols. Kill our merchants, we kill your empire, insult our ambassadors, we erase your civilization. It worked. For the next century, cities across Asia surrendered to Mongol armies without fighting. The memory of Bukhara, Samarkand and Urgench terrified entire kingdoms into submission. Genghis Khan left Central Asia in 1221 and never returned. He died in 1227 during his final campaign in China. His sons and grandsons continued building the empire until it became the largest contiguous land empire in history. Urgedei, who commanded the siege, became Great Khan after Genghis's death. He ruled relatively moderately, encouraged trade, built the Mongol capital at Karakoram. The lessons of Urgench influenced his rule. Better to negotiate and tax prosperous cities than destroy them. Joshi, the eldest son who argued for sparing Urgench, died mysteriously in 1227. Some sources say from illness, others suggest Genghis Khan had him assassinated for showing weakness. His descendants became the Golden Horde, ruling Russia for centuries. Chagatai, who demanded total destruction, got his father's homeland in Central Asia. His descendants ruled there until the 14th century. The region was never as prosperous as it had been under the Khwarazmians. The Silk Road trade through Central Asia collapsed. The cities that had been destroyed never fully recovered their former glory. Trade routes shifted north through Mongol-controlled territory, where merchants felt safer. The Islamic world was traumatized. Chronicles from the period describe the Mongol invasions as divine punishment, the end times, apocalypse. The psychological impact lasted for centuries. Urgench itself remained abandoned for 150 years. A new city was eventually built 30 miles away. Different location, same name. The original site was too waterlogged, too haunted by memory to rebuild. Modern archaeology has struggled to locate the original Urgench precisely. The flooding and deliberate destruction was so thorough that the exact site is still debated. Ground-penetrating radar has found anomalies that might be buried structures, but nothing definitive. It's possible to erase a city so completely that even finding its ruins becomes difficult. The human cost is incalculable. Best estimates suggest 10 to 15 million people died during the Mongol conquest of the Khwarazmian Empire, from combat, massacre, disease, starvation, and displacement. That's roughly 5% of the world's population at the time. Individual cities lost entire generations. Craftsmen, scholars, artists, centuries of accumulated knowledge and skill wiped out in days. Libraries burned, manuscripts destroyed, oral traditions lost when entire families were killed. The environmental impact lasted decades. Irrigation systems destroyed by warfare weren't rebuilt. Farmland reverted to desert. Populations that survived were too small to maintain the infrastructure. The region's carrying capacity dropped, preventing population recovery. Some historians argue the Mongol conquest set back Islamic civilization by centuries. The golden age of Islamic science, mathematics and philosophy was centered in Persian and Central Asian cities. When those cities were destroyed, the intellectual momentum was lost. Others argue this is overstated, that Islamic civilization's center had already shifted to Egypt and the Ottoman Empire, and would have done so regardless. The Mongol invasions accelerated existing trends rather than creating new ones. Either way, the destruction was real and lasting. The Khwarazmian Empire never reformed. The Mongols ruled Central Asia for centuries, but they never rebuilt it to its former prosperity. What about the specific question of brutality? Were the Mongols uniquely terrible, or just typical of their time? Medieval warfare was generally brutal, sacking cities, massacring populations, enslaving survivors. These were common practices across cultures. What made the Mongols different was scale and efficiency. European armies might massacre a city's population after a long siege. The Mongols did it methodically to dozens of cities, as deliberate policy. They industrialized medieval brutality. They also used it strategically. The massacres weren't sadistic impulses. They were calculated to spread terror and reduce resistance. Cities that surrendered were generally treated well. Cities that resisted were obliterated. It was a system. Did it work? Absolutely. The Mongol Empire conquered more territory with fewer troops than any empire before or since. Terror was a force multiplier. Was it moral? That's a modern question. Medieval people, Mongols, Europeans, Muslims, Chinese, all accepted warfare as brutal. The question was whether you won. Genghis Khan won. His empire lasted 150 years. His descendants ruled chunks of Asia into the 20th century. The Mughal Empire in India was founded by his descendants. So was the Yuan dynasty in China. The cities he destroyed? Most are gone. Bukhara and Samarkand were rebuilt centuries later and still exist. Balkh is ruins. Urgench is lost marshland. Which legacy matters more? The empire he built or the cities he destroyed? Historians still argue. Modern Central Asia has a complicated relationship with this history. Genghis Khan is celebrated in Mongolia as a national hero, the founder of the nation, unifier of tribes, builder of empire. There are statues, museums, national holidays. In Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, the territories he conquered, he's remembered as a destroyer, the man who ended the Golden Age, the barbarian who burned libraries and killed scholars. Both are true. He was a military genius who built an administrative system that governed continents. He was also responsible for massacres that killed millions. The Siege of Urgench encapsulates this contradiction. Brilliant siege engineering and tactical coordination led to one of medieval history's greatest atrocities. 13 days, an entire city erased. Lessons taught in blood that echoed across centuries. Here's what makes Urgench's destruction particularly haunting. It was avoidable. If Shah Muhammad had compensated for the murdered merchants, there would be no war. If he'd respected the ambassadors, the Mongols would have continued fighting in China and left Central Asia alone. One man's pride, his refusal to show weakness to barbarians, cost millions of lives and destroyed an empire. It's a reminder that diplomatic insults carry consequences, that underestimating your enemies based on cultural prejudice is fatal. That strength isn't just military power, it's knowing when to fight and when to negotiate. The Mongols were barbarians by the standards of Islamic civilization. They were also the most effective military force in the world. Muhammad assumed one fact negated the other. It didn't. Genghis Khan's response was disproportionate by any moral standard. Executing merchants doesn't justify genocide. But by the logic of his time and his goals, building an empire through reputation and terror, the destruction of Urgench made perfect sense. It said, "Don't fuck with the Mongols, the message was received." If you found this deep dive into one of history's forgotten massacres compelling, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what other brutal historical events deserve deeper examination. Urgench thought it was unconquerable. 13 days later, it didn't exist. Sometimes the most advanced weapons lose to the most ruthless determination. Sometimes empires fall because one man couldn't swallow his pride, and sometimes cities disappear so completely that even their ruins become myths.